Becca Smith here, and this video is going to be a start of a new series, I guess-ish. I thought it'd be fun to release the first chapters of the audiobooks that I've done. And going forward, as I finish each new audiobook, probably just the first chapter of the first book in each series. The one I'm working on currently is Riser, so I would just release the first chapter of Riser, and then instead of doing Reaper and Ripper, I would then do the first chapter of Atlas and so on. I just thought it'd be a fun, I just thought it'd be fun. So, and then I decided to put it to, I was just gonna put like a picture, because it's audio. But then I was like, this is YouTube, so I thought it'd be kind of fun to put some video to it. Like for this video, since Dream Diaries takes place in Seattle, I have a lot of footage of Seattle and Pike Place Market and clouds and rain and, just kind of to give you a mood and give a sense of place of where it is, even though it is audio. So I just had a lot of fun putting it all together. Now, the footage, just to give you a heads up, I didn't go to it's a 30-minute chapter, so I didn't edit video to match what the narrator, me, is saying. So it's really just mood video. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Dream entry number 1. My name is Mara Johnson, and I live in Seattle, Washington, although technically Lake Forest Park. And this is my first Dream Diary entry. I decided to write down all of my crazy dreams because sometimes they're a little too much to take. Sure, I have quote-unquote normal dreams like everybody else, but I also have not so normal dreams as well. Psychic dreams, I suppose you'd call them. I really despise the word psychic, though. I cringe anytime anyone tries to label me with it, but I guess there's no other word for it. I dream about horrible, vicious crimes, and a few days later, they're on the news. And it's not like I could be some kind of superhero and warn whoever it was I saw dying. When I dream, it's like I'm actually there, real time. So if I'm dreaming about you, you're already dead. And I think it's worse in Seattle, quote unquote, America's killing fields. That's what the FBI profiler of the Green River Killer said about our Pacific Northwest area, and he's not kidding. I have a nightmare at least twice a month, and maybe 3 out of all the killers I dream about are caught each year, or at least reported about on the news. Sometimes it makes me wonder if the other murders I see are actually real. What if my brain creates these horrific images because it's so used to seeing the real ones? Like I'm connected to evil or something. I can't allow myself to think like that, though. It'll make me crazy, as in more crazy than I already feel. So I'm just gonna write out all my dreams here in this diary and pray no one finds it, because if anyone did, they'd probably lock me up. Mara placed her new diary on her bedside, wondering if it was such a smart idea to be writing down her nightmares. Paranoia threatened to overwhelm her. Knowing every detail of a crime would make her look guilty. How would Mara be able to explain her journal to the police if they arrested her for murder? And how archaic was it to write on actual paper? She wasn't used to writing anything at length with a pen. Her phone was practically surgically attached to her fingers. But she felt safer having her most private thoughts written down on only one source that no one could hack into. She knew how easy it was to find things in the ether of cyberspace and download it to her cell or laptop. And the things she planned on writing in her diary would definitely be hack-worthy material. Turning off the light on her nightstand, Mara snuggled into her warm and cozy down comforter and closed her eyes. She was exhausted, but not tired, a sensation she was all too familiar with. Having nightmares on a regular basis made the whole sleep thing a little difficult. It had been this way since she was 7 and had her first, quote-unquote, vision. Mara's great-uncle, Uncle John, had been her favorite person on the planet before he died. He wasn't actually her uncle by blood, but she was more connected to him than the woman he married, her great-aunt Eleanor. Uncle John was so full of love and light, Mara always looked forward to visiting him. Both Mara's grandfathers had died when she was only a baby, so Uncle John was the closest thing she ever came to having a grandfather. John and Eleanor were in their 70s when Mara was a kid, and they lived on a small island in the Puget Sound called Lopez. Her great-aunt was Uncle John's second wife, since his first wife had passed away before Mara was even born. Great-aunt Eleanor had been their maid. She didn't think much of her great-aunt, except for the fact that her skin always reeked of alcohol. It always made Mara gag when she was forced to sit on her lap for bedtime stories. But dealing with great-aunt Eleanor was always worth it to spend time with Uncle John. He would take Mara and her sister Josie on adventures around the island. One of their favorites was walking down to the beach to dig for clams, then carrying the tasty treats back home and steaming them for dinner. Mara berated herself. She should have known her great-aunt was going to kill her husband. It had been so obvious the summer before it happened, when the whole family stayed with Eleanor and John for a family reunion. The two of them had argued the last night of Mara's stay. When her sister Josie tried to hold Mara back from investigating, Mara shrugged her off and left their room to see what her great-aunt and uncle were screaming about. Mara snuck up to their bedroom door, then cracked it open to garner a better view. In front of her 7-year-old eyes, Mara saw her great-aunt leveling a pistol at Uncle John, screaming at him to stop hitting her. He was 10 feet away. She was punching herself in the stomach, face, arms, and legs. Anywhere that would show a bruise. Mara didn't understand what she was seeing at the time, but hindsight made it clear later on. Her great-aunt was planning to kill Uncle John, and she wanted witnesses to say it was self-defense. As a child, though, Mara simply didn't know what was happening. Her great-uncle looked scared, but at the same time, calm, as if he had dealt with this kind of behavior before. When Uncle John glanced at the doorway and saw little Mara peeking in, he smiled and told her to go back to bed. But Eleanor? She whirled on her niece and stared at her as if Mara had betrayed her, as if Mara had ruined all her plans. Great-aunt Eleanor's look told Mara that she wanted to kill her niece. So, Mara did the only thing she could think of. She ran into the room where her parents were sleeping. When her mother told her to go back to her own room, Mara grabbed a small throw blanket off a chair and lay on the floor. There was no way she was going back out into that hallway. Not with Eleanor there. Though she didn't know it at the time, it was the first time Mara had stared into the eyes of a killer. Something she never wanted to do again. The next morning, Mara woke alone in the room. Without knowing why, she stood up, opened the sliding glass door leading to the back patio, walked outside, and crawled into the doghouse in the center of the courtyard. Mara hid there, not knowing why. It was as if a voice had told her to, guiding her to that doghouse, whispering it would be safe there. Within moments, the slurred bellows of her great-aunt reached Mara's ears. "Didn't your mother ever teach you not to play with knives?" Little Mara froze in fear. Where was her mother? Where was her father, sister, aunts, uncles? Didn't they hear what Eleanor was screaming? Didn't they know Mara was shaking in the back of a doghouse, terrified her life was about to end. But everyone, except Eleanor, had gone down to the beach to dig for clams, not wanting to disturb their sleeping daughter. The legs, that was what Mara remembered the most. Seeing her great aunt's fat, hairy legs walk past the doghouse made Mara's skin crawl. Eleanor kept repeating the phrase, "Never play with knives, little girl," followed by an amused cackle as she searched the grounds for little Mara. When Eleanor was 20 feet away, Mara saw the blade of a butcher knife grasped in her great aunt's hand. Her heart immediately pounded in her throat. Murdered by a 70-year-old woman who she never really liked and stank of alcohol. Mara's heart almost stopped altogether when Eleanor leaned down and made eye contact with her. Her aunt had found her, and Mara was about to die. But she didn't. At that exact moment, Mara's family returned to the house from the beach with a bag full of clams in each hand. Their friendly faces and shouts of "Good morning" and "Hello" were enough to make Eleanor quickly hide her knife and walk back inside the house. Mara never told anyone what had happened. She just wanted to forget it and never think about it again. The event was so out of Mara's realm of reality that after she was riding back home on the ferry, she almost forgot about the entire incident. Life made her forget. Playing with her friends, going back to school, being a kid. It wasn't until the night Great Uncle John was murdered that it all came back to her. And Mara had dreamt the whole thing. Eleanor was screaming at him, blaming him for her horrible life, that she didn't have to wait to make killing him look like self-defense, that she didn't need witnesses. No one would miss him. No one would care. Then, bam! Eleanor shot John in the head. That would have been bad enough, but Mara was forced to watch as her great aunt dragged John's body into the bathroom and proceeded to chop him into pieces. There was so much blood. Mara desperately tried to wake up, but the dream wouldn't let her. She had to witness her great aunt stuff the body parts into a bag and dump them in a barrel outside, dousing the whole lot with gasoline. When Eleanor lit the flame that would destroy the only grandfather she ever knew forever, Mara finally woke up. In those days, Mara and her sister Josie shared a room. Mara had opened her eyes, frozen in shock and fear. She couldn't call out. She couldn't move. It took her over an hour before she could squeak out a tiny yell to her mother, Claire, on the other side of the house. Her voice was so quiet, Josie didn't even wake up at the sound. But Mother's instincts didn't need volume. Mara experienced a flush of relief when she heard her mother's voice call back, "I'm coming!" Claire stayed up all night with her daughter, trying to calm her down. The next morning, Claire phoned Eleanor and John to assuage Mara's fears about his death, and Eleanor assured her that everything was fine, that John was only away on business. It was a story that Eleanor managed to keep up for almost 6 months, until the local police became involved. They found the charred pieces of John's bones, and then a very public trial followed. Eventually, Eleanor went to prison for the crime. The Lopez Butcher. That was what the press called her. The name always sent chills down Mara's spine. Eleanor was a killer, and Mara was related to her by blood. Sometimes that thought alone kept Mara awake at night. But just 10 years after the murder, most people had forgotten, to Mara's relief. Luckily, no one knew she was related to Eleanor. Her dad's name protected the family from being discovered since Eleanor was related to Mara's mother, and it wasn't like anyone knew her mother's maiden name anyway. Mara had only told her best friend Zia about her family connection to the Lopez butcher, but Mara trusted Zia to keep a secret. Mara was grateful her relationship to the Lopez butcher was hidden because high school was hard enough without being shunned and ridiculed because you were related to a murderer. All Mara knew, though, was that after her dream about Uncle John being butchered, something must have opened up a part of Mara's brain. A part that could witness horrible crimes like his death, because she'd been having the nightmares ever since. Or maybe it was being related to a killer. Maybe her great aunt had dreams like Mara's, and she finally acted on them by killing her husband. These were the thoughts that plagued Mara. She hated seeing what she saw. It didn't make her feel special or unique. It made her feel dirty, like some part of her was connected to something sinister. Mara constantly had to shove those kinds of thoughts down, especially now when she was trying to sleep. Other than her dreams, though, Mara was just a normal teenager. She had just turned 17 in the summer, and now that school was starting again, her parents had bought her an old 1966 Volkswagen Beetle. It was a clunker, but her father George declared that since, quote, all VW bugs run on rubber bands and luck, end quote, he was willing and able to fix anything that might go wrong. Mara didn't want to call him cheap, per se, but he was definitely a penny pincher. She didn't care, though. Having her own car was thrilling beyond measure. It meant freedom. Sure, she only went to the movies and the mall, but now she could do it without her parents. Her best friend and pretty much only friend, Zia, also received a car for her 17th birthday over the summer. It was a brand new VW Bug, so it was fun to compare the modern-day version of the car with Mara's older model. Mara thought it would be weird not to take the bus with Zia. They had been regular bussers since the 7th grade, so they were both enjoying their freedom immensely. The first day of senior year would be starting the next day, and Mara was a bit nervous. Kamiko Thompson and Mean Girls in general hated her for some reason. Probably because they couldn't understand why Zia wanted to hang out with her more than them. But Mara decided long ago to simply try and keep out of their way. If she didn't have Zia, her life would be full of what she considered quote-unquote Facebook friends, which basically translated to nothing real, just acquaintances who wanted to make their friend count high, so they stooped to accepting her friend request. In the halls, of course, they completely ignored her. Mara tried to quiet her mind so she could fall asleep. Since this was always an impossible task, she resorted to her tried and true method of shutting out her busy thoughts by repeating the words, "I'm exhausted," over and over. Eventually, the tedium of that mantra made her head believe it and forced her to focus on one thing as opposed to a million. An hour later, she finally dozed off. Oh no. Mara chastised herself for starting that damn dream journal and rehashing thoughts of her great aunt. She knew it would make her have another nightmare. But when she saw whose house she was in, Mara knew she would have dreamed this, diary or not. She was in the Garner's house across the street from hers. No. She couldn't bear watching something horrible happen to someone she actually recognized again. Since her great-uncle John's murderer, Mara thankfully had never witnessed a crime against anyone she knew personally. Ed Garner. He was in his 70s and couldn't hurt a fly. His wife, Millie, had died a few years back from liver cancer. Since then, he'd pretty much become the hermit of the block. The Garners had been a staple in the neighborhood Mara's whole life and always gave out the best Halloween candy every year. Who would want to hurt a nice old man, especially a widower? Mara realized immediately that this dream was different from her others. Normally, she'd watch the horrific scenes take place as if she were in some kind of 3D movie, seeing what happened like a fly on the wall. This time, however, she was physically inside the killer's body. Because she had never experienced this before, Mara hoped that maybe he was just a burglar. Maybe this was the universe altering her visions into something more tolerable. It would be terrible to watch such a nice man like Ed Gardner being robbed, but at least he'd be alive. And maybe the thief would walk by a mirror and she could identify him. Mara could lie and say that she'd been up late because she was nervous about the first day of school and she saw the burglar running out of the house. Mara had the whole scenario planned as she watched the man. Yes, definitely a man. She could tell by his gloved, masculine hands and large feet walk through the upstairs hallway. She would be a hero. Maybe this would change her destiny and she'd never have to see another murder again. The man opened the door at the end of the corridor. Inside the room, Ed slept soundly in his bed. Mara shook the fear out of her as best she could, trying to rationalize why a burglar would risk being caught by going directly to where the occupant of the house was located. Did most people keep their money and valuables in their bedrooms? Yes, that had to be it. He'd be very quiet, but he'd be able to steal all Mr. Gardner's goods without even waking him. Denial, denial, denial. The word haunted her mind. Mara tried to push it out of her thoughts. She had to stay positive. Nothing had happened yet. Usually her vision started right in the middle of a killing. There was no lead up like what was happening now. Her usual nightmare dreams were so vicious and short, so this had to be something different. It just had to, because if this was happening as Mara was dreaming it, and this man was going to, at this moment, murder her neighbor, then Mara would never be able to forgive herself for not waking up and calling the police. The time it had already taken for the intruder to walk down the hallway could have been enough time to scare him off and save Mr. Gardner's life. Wake up! Mara screamed to her subconscious, but she was locked in the intruder's head. Mara kept trying to somehow take over this man's body, force him to leave the house. But it didn't work that way. She was stuck as an observer. Desperately wanting him to search the room for valuables, Mara's heart sank when he pulled out a container from the inside of his jacket. When he opened it, inside lay a syringe filled with a clear liquid. Mara's instincts and years of dreams kicked in as she immediately looked at the reflection of the window, hoping that at least she could be of some good. If this man was going to murder Ed Gardner, she was going to make sure she could identify him. Disappointment flooded through her. He wore a dark ski mask to match his dark clothing. Mara wished and prayed she could wake up. This was too much to bear. Being made to watch something so vile was a cruelty that proved to her there was true darkness in the world. The man took the syringe and walked softly toward Ed. "Wake up! Wake up!" Mara screamed in her head again. Nothing. She couldn't do it. Details. She needed to remember the details. Anything that might catch this guy. Mara wanted to close her eyes in her own dream, but a part of her curse was the inability to shut it off. She'd always compared it to the torture scene in the movie A Clockwork Orange, as if there were invisible prongs prying her eyes open. The man reached down and injected the liquid into Ed's neck. Ed woke up gasping. He jumped to a sitting position, clasping his chest, trying to breathe in air. He suddenly noticed the killer standing before him and choked out, "Who are you?" Upon realizing that the man was the person responsible for his seizing chest, Ed tried to leap to his feet, but whatever was in that syringe got the best of him. He stumbled, tangling himself in the blankets. The killer pulled off his mask. Mara desperately tried to see his face in any reflective surface, but there was nothing near him. When Ed saw who the man was, he looked confused. His breathing came out in short, quick gasps as he sputtered, "I don't know what lies." But he never finished his sentence. His head dropped to the floor with a small thud. Ed Gardner was dead. Normally, this was when Mara woke up, but it didn't happen. Her dreamscape changed, and she was in the middle of a field of sunflowers. The yellows and browns were so sharp she found her dream self squinting from brightness. It was such a stark contrast of horror versus beauty that Mara wasn't sure what to do. "Mara?" A voice sounded behind her. She whirled around and her whole being filled with joy. Great Uncle John stood before her. No bullet holes, no evidence of what her great aunt had done to him anywhere on his body. Mara fell into him. The dream was so real she could even feel the heat from his chest as he embraced her lovingly. She wanted to stay there forever. Mara didn't want to think about what she had just witnessed. Being with Great Uncle John felt safe. He pulled away slightly to look down at her. That was when she realized she was now in her 7-year-old body, staring up at her great uncle's kind, adoring eyes. "You're in danger, Mara." Is the killer coming here? Is he on some kind of spree? Her thoughts jumped to the most terrifying scenario. Uncle John shook his head. "You're safe tonight, but the danger is coming, Mara. Keep your eyes open." Is this really you? Mara wanted it to be her grandfather of the heart. Seeing him made her feel better. "It doesn't really make a difference, does it, whether I'm your subconscious or a guardian angel? All that matters is that you listen. Watch with both sets of eyes. You'll need them to save what you love most." "Huh?" "Wake up," he whispered. "Seriously, wake up!" Josie's voice caused Mara to open up her eyes. Her younger sister grabbed Mara's arm and yanked her out of bed, pulling her to the window. "The cops are all over the Gardner's place. What happened? There's a body bag, but they're not telling anyone what's going on, just to stay in your houses." Her sister's long blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her bright blue eyes were wide with expectancy. Josie was younger than Mara by 2 years, and on days like today, it showed. Both girls were thin like their parents, and they had their mother's delicate facial features, although Josie's nose had a bump on the bridge from where she broke it on the monkey bars when she was 6. Mara rubbed her eyes, hoping beyond hope that her dream had been simply that, a dream. But seeing the police and the flashing lights of an ambulance parked across the street only proved that what she dreamed had really happened. But it was the second dream that haunted her at the moment. Uncle John's words kept repeating in her head. "Watch with both sets of eyes. You'll need them to save what you love most." What did that mean? Both sets of eyes. As far as Mara knew, humans only had one set of eyes. And what did she love the most? It was probably a brain fart after having to witness Ed Gardner's gruesome death, but still, it had been so real. Mara swatted the thought away and focused back on her sister. How should I know what happened? Mara hid the truth, not wanting to talk about her vision. Oh, please. You've been dreaming about murders for like ever, and you're telling me one happens across the street and you don't see it? I know you better than that. And I know it's only impossible to wake you up when you're in one of your trance thingies. No, Josie wasn't going to let this one go. Mara sighed and flopped back down on her pillow. This apparently was proof that Josie was right, because she sat down next to Mara. Spill, she ordered. Her sister's enthusiasm irritated Mara. It's kind of gross that you're all into knowing the details, you know. Josie rolled her eyes. Yeah, it's called being human. Ever heard of it? Staring at car accidents, watching horror movies. Any of these things ring a bell? Then she dropped her false bravado, and the reality of the situation kicked in. It's Mr. Garner, Mara. Like the nicest fuddy-duddy on the block. Who would want to hurt him? I'm not being morbid. I'm just, I don't know, scared. Hearing about a murder is one thing, but seeing an actual real crime across the street, it's freaking me out. Mara could see that her sister was scared, and she should be. All this happened while the neighborhood slept peacefully. A supposedly safe neighborhood at that. I couldn't see the killer's face. He was wearing a mask. She didn't want to tell Josie that she was in the murderer's body. It almost felt like she'd be admitting to the crime itself. Then she realized being stuck in his head made Mara experience firsthand what it was like to kill someone. I'm gonna barf. She ran into the bathroom. Before Mara could empty the contents of her stomach, Josie was right behind her, holding back Mara's long brown hair. For a 15-year-old, her voice was soothing. You're gonna be okay, Mara. Just get it out. After a few dry heaves, Mara knew she wasn't gonna puke. Her sister let go of her hair, and the two of them sat on the bathroom floor. Josie reached over and squeezed Mara's arm in support, then instructed, Don't tell Mom or Dad. I just thought, if you saw the guy, maybe, but it won't do any good to come forward. The cops will just think it was you. Thanks, Mara groaned, her worst fears brought to light by her lovely sister. You know what I mean. Josie tucked a piece of Mara's hair behind her ear affectionately. I'm sorry I barged in here and almost made you throw up. I'm an idiot. Mara cracked a small smile, though it was forced from the surging emotions flowing through her. She sighed deeply. It's okay. It was a long night. Well, it's gonna be a long day too. First day as a senior. Josie wrinkled her nose sarcastically. And aren't you so excited? Not in the least. Josie stood up and helped Mara to her feet. Well, either way, you better get ready. We have to leave in a half hour. We? Mara asked with dread. It didn't take future-seeing dreams to know what was coming next. Yeah, Mom says you have to drive me to school this year. Fantastic.